It is now time for Session 3, titled New Pathways of Value. As global trade and investment frameworks evolve, what new industrial and investment policies are advanced economies around the world adopting to remain competitive? What innovative policy resets are needed to facilitate the growth of new industries and bring fresh impetus to existing ones here in Singapore? How can we promote innovation and prepare the workforce for the opportunities ahead? This session will unpack these timely and critical issues that will shape Singapore's future economy. This panel will be moderated by Mr. Chan Yi-Ming, Executive Vice President of the Economic Development Board, and he will introduce the panelists and the session. Once again, we will have a Q&A session after the panelists' presentations. We'd like to encourage you to be brief and keep to one question per person. You may also submit and upvote questions online via the Q&A platform. May I now invite Mr. Chan and the panelists of Session 3 on stage, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So thank you for the introduction. My name is Yi-Ming. I'm on the Executive Committee of the Singapore Economic Development Board, and I'm really delighted to be part of the IPS conference today. Thank you very much for having us. It's a real honor to be with three individuals, right, who bring to this panel very deep and diverse experiences. They have strong track records, obviously, in leadership and success in their respective industries. And they have now the challenge and the opportunity, right, to lead global companies and teams to navigate today's dynamic environment, while at the same time also future-proofing their businesses and teams and their operations to deliver value for the long term. And their insights will no doubt be valuable to us in this room as we examine for ourselves how Singapore can strengthen our own value propositions to the world and prepare our own people to seize these new opportunities. So let me get down to introducing them in turn. Immediately to my right, we have Mr. Bob Sternfels, Global Managing Partner at McKinsey & Company. Bob has spent over 30 years at McKinsey. He took over the top leadership role over 4 years ago and leads the team of nearly 40,000 McKinsey employees worldwide. Bob has been extremely influential in McKinsey's establishment of significant capabilities in-house in the digital space, AI, sustainability at a very early stage. And Bob is a very good friend of Singapore. He serves and sits on the Singapore EDB's International Advisory Council. Thank you very much for being here with us, Bob.
Thanks.
Next, we have Mr. Kojin Nakakita, a Vice President and Executive Officer at Hitachi. He is also the chairman of both Hitachi Asia and Hitachi India. Nakakita-san has been with Hitachi since 1988 and has advanced its business interests across a very wide range of areas, digital infrastructure, green energy, mobility, and manufacturing. The EDB as an organization has obviously partnered Hitachi as a broader group for many years to deepen its presence in our region. And we've seen how Nakakita-san's leadership and deep technical expertise have helped the company advance sustainability-driven innovation, which is critical for companies aiming to scale and serve their business interests in the Asia-Pacific. Thank you very much, Nakakita-san, for joining us. Finally, we have Ms. Su Shan, CEO and Director of DBS Group, a veteran banker of over 35 years in the industry, in global banks and major financial institutions and centers. She's experiences across the globe, including Hong Kong, Tokyo, London. Su Shan is steering DBS through its next phase of growth and unlocking new opportunities through digital innovation and talent development. Really exciting time. She's also a board member of the EDB and sits on numerous advisory boards, including Sir James Dyson's Family Office, Weybon, and Climate Impact X, demonstrating her commitment to sustainability and community impact. So just as a quick administrative note, as far as flow goes, I'm gonna invite each of the panelists to give a quick sharing, their own perspectives in turn, and then we will kind of come together for a round of Q&A. So Bob, if you don't mind, please do us the honor of kicking us off.
Super, thank you. So it's a privilege to be here and up with the fellow panelists. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I'd also just say thank you to our hosts, IPS and SBF, for facilitating, I think, such an energizing set of conversations today. And I'll start with maybe just a comment on the past 60 years before we look to the next 60, and say what an inspiring journey that Singapore has been on. To sustain an average of 7% per year annual GDP growth is nothing short of miraculous. And when you then look underneath and see industry-leading powerhouses across manufacturing to financial services, it's an awe. And this wasn't done by chance. It was driven by forward-thinking policies and bold bets. And I think the real question is, what bold bets will define the next 60 years? And so I'll start with some work that we've done at McKinsey's Global Institute, where we looked at arenas of competition. And we defined arenas in three main ways. Arenas show outsized growth. On average, companies in the arenas that we've defined, if you looked at the last 20 years, grew at about 16% annually, compared to 6% for non-arenas. They tend to create global champions. If you look today, 8 of the 10 leading companies in the world operate within these arenas. And they're also multipliers for economic growth. They're hotbeds of innovation. 2/3 of global R&D occurred in these arenas. And they also allowed new entrants. 34% of the companies that are in arenas today didn't exist when these arenas started. Now, if you looked at the first set of analysis we did between 2005 and 2023, it was clear that this catalyzed global growth. But one of the sad statistics was 80% of that activity occurred in the US and China, with ASEAN accounting for less than 1%. But I'm here to say that that can change. So let's look forward. So we then looked out to 2040 and tried to define the next arenas for competition. There were 18 of them, but they clustered around 6 themes. A foundation built in semiconductors, the continued expansion of the digital economy, the AI surge, rapid increasing electrification, new biopharma, and the evolution of the physical realm, which includes things like robotics and space. When you look at the value potential created up to 2040, it's enormous. Our estimates are between 29 and 48 trillion of annual revenue opportunity in these areas. And here's the exciting part. APAC is set to be the largest market for these arenas, nearly twice as large as North America. And on the supply side, ASEAN already holds competitive footholds in areas such as semiconductors, transportation and logistics, and advanced manufacturing. So now let's zone in on Singapore. Where does Singapore stand? Well, today, about half the companies resident in Singapore sit inside one of these future arenas. Now, on the one hand, that's not good, say, compared to the US, where the US has nearly 2/3 of the companies sitting inside these arenas. So there's room to catch up. But our history shows that early signs of activity, even small, are strong indicators of future dominance. And when you look at some examples in Singapore, you look at C Group's Shopee for e-commerce, you look at the investments Global Foundries and Micron have made for semiconductor fabrication and R&D, you think of Grab on autonomous and electric mobility, Turtle Tree around synthetic proteins in bio, and equatorial space systems in new space businesses, you see footholds. So across these arenas, Singapore can create disproportionate value for the decade ahead. And let me offer 4 imperatives, or maybe ideas, if Singapore does want to create disproportionate value in these future arenas. So here are the 4 imperatives. The first, and we heard the Prime Minister talk about this morning, is continuing to connect versus divide. When we think about the world reconnecting, we believe that the world will diversify in its trade patterns, and Singapore can play a disproportionate role by maintaining principles of multilateralism and thinking about connection with all major trading routes. But not only physical trade, trade in the digital economy. And so the recent agreements with the UK, Australia, and Chile that enable data flows, e-payments, and AI governance could actually swamp the physical flows in the world going forward. So can Singapore play a role in this? Physical infrastructure also plays a role, and you think about things like the Pan-Asian Railway, new land-sea corridors, and record high throughput in Singapore's ports by using next-gen technology. All of these can create an advantage for Singapore. And our work says that 30% of trade is projected to shift by 2035, 30% of global trade. Can Singapore position itself to be a beneficiary of this change in trade? So that's one idea, continuing to connect. The second is adapting core industries with speed, and I'll focus in particular on the physical world of manufacturing, which is about 20% of Singapore's economy today. And underneath that, you see real strength in petrochemicals, semiconductors, life sciences. I think we know this. But as AI moves from the digital to the physical world, there's real opportunity in reimagining production lines and reimagining supply chains. It also has the potential to alleviate one of the biggest burdens that we see, which is future labor shortages. And if we look at Singapore, Singapore hit peak working age population in 2012. And it was going to fall precipitously all the way through 2050. Labor is actually going to be a shortage. And the work that we've done around Gen AI says there's a potential to add up to 30% more output from today's workforce by fully embracing Gen AI technologies. If we look at robotics in particular, we've seen an all-time high in 2023 about robotics deployment. There were 4 million robots deployed in the world in 2023, and that projection is only due to go up. Now, who leads the world in this? Actually, Korea does. Korea leads the world at 1,000 robots per 10,000 workers, but Singapore's second at about 700, and that's ahead of China and Germany, who come in at about 450. So Singapore's got a shot at leading the world in terms of robotics deployment. And I did some brainstorming on this, and at McKinsey, we've rethought how we think about our workforce to make our consultants superhuman using these technologies. And when I'm asked today what our workforce in McKinsey is, you mentioned that we have about 40,000. I actually say we have 52,000. So we have 40,000 humans. We've deployed 12,000 agents. And I think in the not too distant future, by the end of this decade, McKinsey will probably be 50,000 humans and 50,000 agents. So we'll have a workforce of 100,000. Now, if you start to say, what could this mean for Singapore? Let's think through what it could look like by 2030. Singapore will probably have about 2.5 million people in the workforce by 2030, according to current estimates. But Singapore could easily augment that with 500,000 robots and 2.5 million agentic agents. And if you put that together, that's a workforce that's over 5 million. Double what it is today. And if you think about the GDP potential of doubling of the workforce to go after all of this latent impact, I think you see enormous opportunity. I wonder if that's something Singapore can lead the way on. But this hinges on my third point, which is around reskilling. The average half-life for a skill that an employer gives an employee today is less than 5 years. And the average half-life, if you just focus on technology skills, is less than 2 years. So education needs to change. We'll fundamentally need to rethink how we move from discrete learning to continuous learning. So if you think about the role that a university plays, it needs to change, and the role that large-scale enterprise needs to change. How do we give workers continuous lifelong skills to meet this opportunity to be enabled and to become superhuman with these robots and agentic agents? And maybe the last comment that I'd have is this isn't going to come without capital. Future growth is going to be capital hungry, whether that's in energy, technology, life science. We're going to need capital. And so how can Singapore think about the next unlocks in capital to fuel this growth? And I'd highlight just a couple of things. The first is more risk private capital. So today, Singapore leads the world in venture investing per person. It's at just under 1% GDP, and the US is about 0.75. What would it take for Singapore to get to 2% versus 1%? And what growth could that unlock? The second is around wealth tech. So by enabling wealth tech, we can tackle the 45% of assets in APAC that are in cash and deposits today, which could create enormous velocity for growth by revolutionizing the financial markets. And the final is intergenerational wealth. In APAC, there's about 5.8 trillion that is going to change generations by 2030. How can smart government policy direct that to be making future investments that will enable this growth? So I know I covered a lot, but the questions I would then close with are, how can Singapore not only participate in this next wave of growth, but catalyze it? Think of the arenas that we talked about. What bold bets must be placed now? And how do we actually raise the quantum of those bets to change the odds in the near term, not let this just play out over time? So thank you, and we'll go to my next panelist.
Great, thanks so much, Bob.
Nakakita-san, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my honor to be here and SG60 and beyond. I just came back from Tokyo this morning, and I touched Changi Airport down early in the morning, and I'm really amazed all the time how much time it takes when you leave the gate and go through immigration, customs, and get on your car. My average time was 12 minutes and 30 seconds. Because I already carry on the bags. Otherwise, it takes a little longer, of course. But it's amazing. But can you think about that? How much technologies are inside of that? Just a simple system. Get off the gate, go through immigration, customs, you're out. But it's just the layers of platforms. AI, facial recognitions. Can you imagine how much data has to be involved in that? Data center has to be robust and big. And how much energy consumed? Can you think about that? It's all relates. So having said that, I think we are gathered at the critical inflection point. Just not in Singapore, not in Asia, but for the entire world. And how the global economy would need to be redesigned. The key word, redesign. Okay? This is not a typical transition between industrial phases we have seen in the past. We are experiencing a full-scale operation system reset for economies, industries, and institutions. The question is simple, but it demands a bold answer. How does Singapore, a nation built on a trade, trust, and transformation, lead the next chapter of global economic redesign? The fundamental foundation of business and country will change through 2038. Outside of people, we will be managing two essential elements, intelligence, and energy. Every decision will revolve around how does we embed more intelligent and how do we power it? This will lead to a world where every object, space, and process is infused with intelligence enabled by digital, physical integrations, and near zero marginal cost, and omni-sentient world. The companies and countries that can balance these two focus points will win. So why 2038? We are managing two simultaneous transformation timelines. One, the intelligence transformation, the rise of AI and digital currencies, digital platforms, and distributed intelligence. We will refine business through 2030. The physical transformation, energy transitions, advanced manufacturing and robotics, and autonomous infrastructure will rewire the physical foundation of economy, unfolding through 2038. Transformation timeline I just mentioned to you. These 2 points together, they are collapsing the old models. Number one, the labor-driven growth, linear supply chains, hierarchical scale, and this being replaced by some more fluid, more intelligent, and far more scalable. AI-native industries, digital physical integrations, intelligent value networks, net zero emerging cost economies. This is not just the disruptions. This is a great redesign. So what are other Singapore's challenges and opportunities, I think? Singapore has long been in a multi-dimensional global hub. But the world is shifting from location-based advantage to intelligence-based relevance. In this new world, geography matters less, and intelligence matters more. Singapore's existing investment in AI, energy transactions, research, and forward-looking, but table stakes in this new world. The question is, how does Singapore lead in an intelligent first and platform-powered world? So, what leading global cities must do? That's our opinion. Here's a new playbooks. Platform economies as infrastructures, AI as public utility, intelligent supply chain sovereignty, sentient economic operations, workforce for the intelligence era. Let's explore what these actually mean in practice. Imagine a Singapore that operates in a sentient system. AI-managed infrastructure, real-time digital twin of the economy, autonomous trade and logistics, AI-augmented governance. A city is not just connected, but alive to its own activity and environment that is not just responsible, but predictable. So what is the next step for Singapore? To lead the future economy, Singapore can launch a national platform strategy, treat AI as a public infrastructures, build a nationwide digital twin, create borderless AI talent corp, and own the intelligent supply chain layer. So this is my last slide. A nice brief for you. The cities that wins the next decade won't be the fastest or biggest, but one of that sense adapt and orchestrate intelligence better than anyone else. I think Singapore has a governance structure, the capability and imagination to lead the world, and not just as a connector of trade, but an intelligent economic organism at the heart of the global system. Last but not least, I want to ask you questions. If that all comes, how safe do you feel? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Finally, we will invite Su Shan to share her perspective.
It's so hard going last, especially when you've had Bob from McKinsey and Nakakita-san from Hitachi. I was busy scrambling because, I had to kind of change my speech last minute, so I'm not repeating what has been said, but also kind of, osmosis, taking some of the fantastic intelligence I got and stealing it and putting it into what I'm going to share. So I was in New York on April the 2nd, which for some of you, if you can't remember, that was Liberation Day. So in between meetings, of course, I had CNBC and Bloomberg on, and in between those, there were ads that popped up. Thank God I didn't switch off during the ad, because one of the ads, the advertisements that came up was, in a volatile world, we are still stable, we're still open, we're transparent, we're secure, we stay the course. You know what that was? That was an ad from EDB, the Economic Development Board of Singapore. And you know what, Nakakita-san? I felt safe.
Oh.
I felt home. I felt grounded, like, big sigh of relief. And that is the heart of why this little red dot has been successful. Right? We've gone from inception in 1965, a GDP of $500 per person, to $93,000 per person, because of what we have collectively done. Our forefathers have laid the foundations, and we have to continue what they have done. The principles, the ethos, the values that have been represented, those cannot change. How we work, how we do business will continue to evolve, but the basic principles of how we function as a country will not and cannot change. The US dollar against the Sing was $3. It's now $1.28, keeps going up. I actually did a straw poll of some of my clients 2 weeks ago. You know what I asked them? I asked them, hey, when do you think you will see parity on the dollar Sing? I won't tell you what they said. FDI from 93 million to 152 billion. So these, large numbers belie the hard work that our country has put together, both government, private sector, citizens, etc. But as I said, the constant is trust and openness. And it's trust. I like to tell stories. So in 2012, my chairman, Peter Seah, said very last minute on F1 day, hey, do you want to have lunch with somebody called Jack Ma from China? And of course, I jumped at the opportunity. And it was my first time to meet him. And he said to me, my CEO Piyush at the time, and Peter, you guys in Singapore, you underestimate how people trust you, and that is your secret sauce. I said, what do you mean? He said, things that you have to put on your body or put into your mouth, you better trust, right? And if there was a verification and a stamp of approval from Singapore, people around the world would trust it. And that's what we mean. it's that integrity and transparency which has been built over time. It's not come easily. It's 60 years of constant performance and reliability. But it's also the stability. Come hell or high water, this little red dot, hopefully, as long as we are sustainable, will still be here. But also the openness, the fact that we've remained open for trade, physical trade, digital trade, capital trade, flow of capital, talent, ideas. That is really our secret sauce, what I call our unique selling point, or USP. So, we're small. That's a perceived disadvantage. But I like to think we have a Goldilocks size. We're, not too small to be irrelevant, but not too big to be unwieldy. In fact, being small means we can be nimble. We can adjust and we can move quite quickly. And boy, do we need to grow quickly now. In a time of geopolitical turmoil, profound technological changes, big climate issues, and also a massively aging economy. By 2050, 1 in 4 persons in Asia will be over 60 years old. What does that mean? I mean, that means profound changes in the way we operate as a country and then as a region. So with the geopolitics, our government has done a lot to make sure that we have had structural resiliency in our global supply chains. In technology, a lot of it lies in the trust of your data. I play with Gen AI, my team and I play with Gen AI every day, all the time. And all you need, and for those of you all use GPT or Grok or DeepSeek, the answers are so confident, right? It's a yes-no answer with great reasons why the answer came out. And it could be hallucinating and you'll think it's correct. But when you have that synthetic data then being used for your models, where you then use the outcomes on fake data, how do you trust the system? Well, the good thing is hopefully we are creating some cynicism in our country. And we're also hopefully, this is our game to lose. I think Singapore can actually be a trusted hub for data verification. I'll come to that in a minute. But because the pace of change, whether it's in technology, whether it's the geopolitics, trade, tariff one day, inflation, deflation, the rate of drops and volatility in markets, I haven't seen this in 40 years. I've been in the markets for 35. Interest rates going up and going down at the speed that we have seen is really unprecedented. And climate change in terms of pollution and carbon emissions, we need to stay the course. So what's the response for Singapore? And I'm trying to keep it all to, the global city, Singapore, SG60 and beyond, new pathways of value. That's what we're supposed to talk about today. I think we can really play to win where we are strong. And here are 6 industries that I think we can really play to win in. Being a banker, I have to put finance first. Pardon that. But we've always been very strong in the fixed income, debt markets, in currencies and commodities. We're trying our best now to come back in the equity market. I think the MAS's $5 billion equity market development program will be helpful. I think trying to get more income or more flows of capital to get into the SME and mid-cap sector is constructive. But where we've done well in wealth management and asset management as a country. And that was concerted drive. I mean, I was part of the industry push, but it was a really public-private partnership to build, number 1, the talent, number 2, the code of conduct, and number 3, the ecosystem of wealth management and asset management to come to Singapore. That is a very sticky multiplier effect on the rest of the economy. Private markets, here, Asia is a little bit, I think, behind the US and Europe, but this is our game to win as well. We can create a vibrant ecosystem. We've already done well, I think, in the startup ecosystem. There's more to do in the VC and private credit or private equity side. I don't think we should be rushing in, but I think this is a market worth investing in. For wealth and asset management, our total AUM is now over 6 trillion. We are a key gateway for both global asset managers and investors, and a great hub. People want to invest in Asia, they come to Singapore, right? And so 77% of AUM are sourced from outside Singapore, and 88% of that AUM, which although it's booked here, it's actually invested globally as well. So therein lies the opportunity of how do you harness all that capital into high economic value creating activities. On digital assets, I'm quite constructive. I know, we're not keen as a country on crypto, but on digital assets, and that could be stablecoin, it could be tokenized money market funds, tokenized deposits. Again, because we are a trusted hub, I believe that that is our game to lose. So as long as we can come up with good regulations that have the long-term picture in mind, which I'm sure MAS will, this is a growing market. And with the Genius Act and the Clarity Act soon to come, I think there will be a lot more excitement to come in this space. And then technology, I think a lot has been said on AI, robotics, and semiconductor. And here I want to sound like EDB, because actually I didn't even know this, because I thought, wow, we're a really small country. But Singapore is 11% of global semiconductor production and 20% of global semiconductor equipment manufacturing, which is quite a no mean feat. And I like to think that as the world becomes more bifurcated, there will be a need for someone to sort of sit in between the best of East and West technology. And here I'd like to borrow a word from Minister Josephine Teo, who last week at a conference said that we are strategically unaligned. I like that. I've never heard that word, that phrase before, but I like that. I think being strategically unaligned, but being a trusted hub, having something like the AI Verify Foundation, which we just launched, which is the world's first AI governance testing framework and toolkit for the responsible use of AI, I think that puts us at the forefront as well. So continuing also in energy, in healthcare, and again here I want to shout out, I thought I saw Dr. Bae Swanjin, my friend Dr. Bae, I think one of the original, frontier pioneers in the Biopolis. It was a long-term investment, but I think that's really put us at the forefront of future healthcare. I think whether it's genome sequencing, personalized medicine, the use of AI or quantum for healthcare, again, a lot of excitement in this space and something that I believe Singapore can play to win. Logistics and supply chain, again, given the greater need for supply chain resiliency and diversification, we can play a key role as a trusted node within Asia for global supply chains. And here, we do need to digitize supply chains. When I started looking at corporate banking, I was shocked at how paper-based international trade is. Documentary trade, SBLC, a lot of that's still paper-based. So creating a digital infrastructure, which we did actually. We have something called SG60 and IMDA has something called Trade Trust, which is a digital utility to optimize trusted exchange of digital trade documents. Again, because we can verify and we can prove, Singapore can play a very strong node in both the physical and the digital supply chain network. So whether, and high-end manufacturing, again, taking a leaf of what we're seeing out of North Asia with great, Industry 4.0, robotics, humanoid robots, drones, etc. I think, again, we can look forward to a lot more innovation in the manufacturing space. So I won't repeat the slide because I think both my fellow panel members have talked a lot about the talent issue and the connectivity and openness issue and the ecosystem issue. But I'd like to, just dimension a bit about talent through some stories. Last week, my HR colleagues told me that they downloaded the brain of a guy called Marshall Goldsmith. For those of you who are lucky enough to have had him as your mentor, this is the #1 executive coach in the world for CEOs and C-suites. And my HR head said, you know what? Why can't everyone in DBS have a Marshall Goldsmith in their pocket? And today with generative AI, you can, right? You can download his brain and then ask it questions like, how do I enhance my career process, what should I learn, how do I deal with a difficult boss, how do I deal with my colleagues, how do I become a better leader, etc. So the AI enables us today to download the best brains we have to train your next generation a lot quicker and faster. And this is a new form of talent management. As I tell my managers today, don't hire for knowledge because knowledge is ubiquitous and democratized. Hire for attitude. Hire people who are agile, nimble, willing to change, humble, willing to learn. So the new form of talent management. And as in an agentic world, again, I ask my colleagues, hey, now we're dealing with agent to agent. Who is the HR lead here? Is it HR or is it tech? Because technology today manages all our agents. So are our agents today technology? So I'd like to end with a quote from one of our four founders, Dr. Rajaratnam, in '72. He said, "An independent Singapore survives and will survive because it has established a relationship of interdependence in the rapidly expanding global economic system." How prescient and how true, Nakakita-san. We are, will be our intelligence and not the geography that defines our advantage. So long may we stay intelligent and relevant. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Su Shan. And thank you very much to our three panelists for giving us a lot to chew on. I think we've really covered a large range of topics. With our remaining time, what I would suggest, I think we'll give the crowd a little time to warm up. There are mics on the floor. We'll allow people to come forward. I'll use my privilege as moderator to maybe kick us off with a question, and then see whether there are any people with questions on the floor. There are questions coming in on Pigeonhole as well, so please feel free to raise your questions. Include your name and your organization. I think that would be very helpful for context. So if allow me to kick us off. All three of you, kind of in different forms, kind of touched on the topic of the workforce, talent, skilling, reskilling. Perhaps I can ask, from the perspective of a business leader, right, someone who runs a global organization, and as we in Singapore, as we think about ecosystems, how do you think businesses, policymakers, or government more broadly, and maybe even educators, what kind of models of partnership can these stakeholders or these groups think about or try to forge as we try and bridge some of these, or maybe not bridge a gap, that sounds quite negative, to kind of seize these opportunities, right? Because there are issues of trying to keep pace, there are issues of where are we going to be, where are we going to need to be. What kind of models of partnership would you think about as a business leader and maybe advise governments, policymakers, other businesses, and maybe even educators? Maybe I'll kind of give you a minute to kind of think about that and take and see if there are any questions from the floor. What we're going to do is maybe take the question first, give the panelists maybe a chance to kind of react to my first question, and then we'll kind of bunch up and see whether many people want to build. How about that? So maybe I'll allow you to kind of ask the first question, your name, your organization, and if you're directing it to a particular panelist.
All right, thank you, panelists, for the very insightful sharing. I am Nicholas Pramono from St. Joseph's Institution. So I think the common linking thread between all three presentations is the importance of AI and artificial intelligence. So instead of just asking how we are able to traverse these value pathways, could I also ask how you measure these values? In a world where GDP may be insufficient to measure these hidden values and hidden benefits, what can we actually do to measure these technological benefits? Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll kind of keep that in the back of our mind, if you will, and maybe start with this kind of models of partnership question that I started off with, and then we can kind of go from there. Would anybody like to kind of kick us off?
Okay, well, you're looking at me. So
Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you. Sit in the middle. I hate to be sitting in the middle. But okay, I think as Hitachi, we kind of kick-started 2 years ago when former DPM, Mr. Hen, was there together with EDB. We have an executive talent development program together in Japan and Singapore. We started with Hitachi, we're hosting. We gather about 50 students and 50 top leaders from each companies are selected, gathered in Tokyo, where we do have a 3-month session, one each different season. But the last final version of that in Japan, to give a presentation to both ambassador of Singapore and present that to Keidan Lin, which is the Chambers of Commerce of Japan. So gradually spreading. Because now, I think a young leader, like you mentioned, development is very keen to lead our company into the next stage. So I think this talent development program is #1 priority as of now for us. And one other reason is Young Leader Initiative, which I'm leading this in our region, is every 2 years we take places. This year in the Philippines, we selected 4 students, university students, into our executive programs. So fully paid, fully invited. So we have a good selection going on in each ASEAN countries. We gather every second year, we invite government officials, policymakers, and they learn a quite good deal about the real society, real world. So we're doing that for the last 32 years. Wow. I think it's meaningful, but not so much return to Hitachi, because we're not pushing it. So, okay, but I think it's a good start for us. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm happy to answer the young gentleman from SGI's question. How do you measure the outcomes of AI? And you do A/B testing. So you test with or without, and you run your models. And so it's with something, with whatever AI you've put in, the outcomes are this, then you measure the delta. So that's one. So that's sort of, there are different levers and drivers and outcomes, and for every customer journey, you can input a different model and then you test. So, and the outcomes can be productivity gains, so that means output divided by human input. It can be the delta around number of products. It can be turnaround time, so efficiency. It can be customer outcomes, less complaints, more compliments, or more revenue, or less costs, right? So there are many ways you can quantify the actual AI outcomes. And it really depends on the journey, whether it's a customer journey or an employee journey. So that's for me, an answer to the SGI gentleman question. On your question on PPPs, there's been so many examples, and it really depends on the industry and the problem to solve. When it comes to things like green, climate tech, you really need to have public and private sector, because you've got tech that is expensive and not scalable. You need government support, but you also want industry to use it. So, sandboxes are really often an outcome of PPPs, right? When you have things like broken supply chains and you want to digitize the supply chain by nature is multimodal, global, so you've got to work with different countries, different trade policies, and different suppliers, supply chains, etc. Again, you need partnerships, and G2G also, you need to kind of oil the wheels of commerce and trade. When it comes to AI or the adoption of technology, large corporates can look after themselves, but SMEs can't. And so creating partnerships to allow the SMEs to kind of latch on. In Singapore, we've got this Queen Bee Skills Future Queen Bee, for example, where SMEs kind of gather around a Queen Bee and they get some help, cascading skills, etc. There are a lot of ecosystem partnerships where you have an anchor who can help their supply chain, whether it's their suppliers or their distributors, also adopt AI.
Thank you so much, Su Shan.
Yeah, and maybe I'll try and do one that links both Tan and Kojin together on these two questions. And I guess I start. We need to fundamentally rethink education. The education system that we have today was built on an assumption of a couple things. One, there was a large fixed cost to educate. So you'd build a university, you'd create libraries, you'd have faculty, and there was a large fixed cost on a human pathway, so you would take a fixed amount of time out before you went into the workforce to become educated. With the assumption that then the half-life for those skills was going to last through your professional career. And we're finding a couple things. One is that, as I mentioned earlier, the half-life on those skills is getting shorter and shorter. Whatever credential you come out of high school, undergraduate, postgraduate, the value to us as employers, that's getting shorter and shorter because the rate of technology change is getting faster and faster. The second thing is that the fixed cost of education has changed.
Right.
With all of the technology and different ways to connect, that fixed cost has come down. And so I'll give a practical example of perhaps how public and private could work together and use an A/B test, Dan, to your point. And one of the things we looked at was the potential in an aging society to rethink longevity of work. And we've done work that shows that there's up to 20% GDP improvement by rethinking working longevity. And so McKinsey partnered with a large state university in the US, and we looked for volunteers, folks who were between 55 and 70 that wanted to re-enter the workforce. So we took a group and we paired with this university to say, okay, these folks want to come back in, but they need to be reskilled for today's work. We put them into two groups, an A/B test, and we had one group taught by the professors in this university, and we had one group taught entirely by agentic agents. And we wanted to compare the results to this on the credentialing for these folks. And remember, it's 55 to 70. And the results were really surprising. The results had the agentic agents outperforming the professors by a demonstrable amount. And when we looked at this as to why, a couple things surfaced. Agents were infinitely patient. Right? They never got frustrated with the learner. Agents never missed a cue. So it would reinforce what you're good at, double down what you needed. But more importantly, the questioning ratio for the folks who were using agentic agents was 4 times the amount of questions when they were in the classroom because there was less stigma. There was less fear of, I'm going to raise my hand and I'm the person who doesn't know the answer. When it's an agentic agent, you ask. Now, ultimately, we think the answer is going to be C, which is a blended learning approach. But the experiment was designed to test these 2 different outcomes in a very different way to say, how can we actually bring a segment of society back into the workforce by collaborating public and private?
Great, thank you so much. And we have a number of related kind of questions coming in. I know you touched a little bit, Bob, on working longevity. We have a couple of questions that are being upvoted. We have a lot of students in the room as well, right? So questions coming in, I'll just read them off. And then the first one is, what would you tell a 16-year-old finishing secondary education today what to expect for the economy in 10 years' time as they look forward to the educational years they have left? What would you ask them to think of in terms of areas of topics, subjects to pursue further specialization? And maybe kind of a quick add-on, because you talked a little bit about half-life, the average half-life of the technological skill being less than 2 years. And I think I read some anxiety in some of this question, right? Which is there's less than many university graduates might spend, right? In the time that they have on their degree. So beyond reskilling, do you see a need, Bob specifically, a need for fundamental shift in initial skilling? So this is kind of a different kind of not so much reskilling, but even initial skilling. I know you talked a little bit about the redesign of education.
Well, maybe I can get us going. And,
Go for it.
and Dan, I may build on something you talked about, which I think we have to get underneath the credentials to get to some of the core attributes. And some of those may be things such as the ability to learn new things, resilience, drive. But I also think there's a few things that may be skills that are, at least for the foreseeable future, AI-proof. Because I get asked the question a lot from our younger employees, is AI going to take my job? And what we end up talking about is, what are some things that make you superhuman if you leverage AI? And so take problem solving, right? McKinsey folks do a lot of problem solving, and for years our method was deep fact-based problem solving. Well, the LLMs do that pretty well, and there's still a huge need for that. But the question is, when you have the LLM being able to compress the time to do that to minutes, where it used to take months, what do you do on top? Well, creativity. And LLMs struggle with truly creative, disruptive, non-linear problem solving. And so one of the questions I'd ask, irrespective of the degrees for all the students out there, is how do we think much more about creativity and non-linear problem solving?
Right.
The second is how to think about developing judgment. And so some of you may have seen there was an experiment with one of the leading LLMs in the States where they put their model in charge of their development teams rather than enabling their development teams. They had to shut the experiment down because in 1/3 of the test cases, the LLMs were using blackmail to motivate their teams, right? And when asked why, the LLM responded, well, it's proven that blackmail is a very effective influence technique in humans, right? And so I think what it highlights is, how do we develop judgment and this ability to add judgment? And the final one is, look, to drive change in this world, there's still a large aspect of helping convince somebody to do something that they normally wouldn't have done, right, in any enterprise. And so this idea of human-to-human interactions. And so where I might go is almost below the degree level, because many people ask me, what degree should I study now in a world of AI?
Sure.
But I wonder if there's a component intrinsic level that we focus on a bit more to say any of these degrees, as long as they're giving you these intrinsics, are going to make you superhuman.
Right. Thank you so much. Nakakita-san, Su Shan, anything to add? Advice for a 16-year-old or someone who is looking forward to being a working adult, if you will, in 10 years' time?
I have a 6-year-old daughter. I'm 62. I'm 61-year-old now. I'm my own. I don't know what to say to my daughter, I'll tell you. If she asks me what's happening in 20 years, well, Dad don't know. Maybe I don't survive that day. But I tell you, if the 10 years range, we have to be worried about ourselves. How our company survive through this difficult stage. It's similar to you. But like, for example, Hitachi, we have in-house, we have our IT, we have operation technologies, and we have infrastructure businesses, which is energy, rail, all the basic infrastructures. This will never go away in 10 years, to me. So that's why we're staying in the business. The power business will never go away. Electricity will stay. Yeah, if the electricity goes, everything's shut down. Not even AI, you know that. So I ask 10-year-old, what is your dream anyway? First of all, what do you want to be? Then I'll give you guidance. But if I say to my 6-year-old daughter, she wants to be a figure skater, because I was an ice hockey player for all my life. I still do. So I'm glad that she said that to me. The machine cannot take over human sports. So just go to it and make a good money for us. So anyway, my suggestion would be just find what you want to do, first of all. And it's not the future that's going to decide your life. I think it's your life decide the future. So whatever in the future, us as a company will look at it, like I said, energy will now go away. Water business will never go away. We cannot replace by something products. Okay, so that's why we're staying in it. That's why we're trying to make it robuster, smarter manufacturer used by AI. Yes, we use that. And go back to his question, so how you judge the AI? And to use AI, if you have to ask the right question to come back with the right answer, right? So if you're an engineer, you ask question, how can I design this, blah, blah, blah. And AI comes back with, if you're not agreed to, don't believe it. That's how it is. That's our judgment in terms of the factory or manufacturing people. So my suggestion to you is, in terms of AI use, yes, whether you want to believe that or you don't want to believe, that's up to you. And whether companies to trust that, not trust that, in use to make the productivity up or production much faster and easier, yes, of course, that's a great method we use. But to how judge it, the outcome is it. If the outcomes, if the customer doesn't satisfy with it, that shows it doesn't work. Yeah. So for me, it's very easy for me to judge that. So 16-year-old, make your dream. Don't let future come to you. You have to find the future for yourself. So that's my suggestion. I'm not sure I'm very old-fashioned. Sorry about this, but.
Okay, I'll take a crack. There isn't a better time to be a young person, and there isn't a better place than Singapore, I think, to thrive in. The how and the what. So for me, the how, I like to talk about the 4 R's. These are my 4 tenets, right? The first R is resilience. Be resilient, because you're going to have it'll be volatile, it'll be choppy, but stay true to yourself and stay resilient. That's one big thing, whether mentally or physically, but more importantly is mental resilience. The second is, reinvent. The second R is reinvent. Be prepared to reinvent yourself. As I said, it doesn't matter too much now. To some extent it does, but it doesn't matter so much what you study at school or university or polytechnic. It matters more about your attitude and your agility, right? So be prepared to reinvent yourself constantly, and stay relevant. That's my third R. Staying relevant to whatever whatever role you want to do, and staying ahead of the trends. And then staying responsible, because you are responsible for your own career and your own path. So that's the tenets and the 4 R's. And the what, Bob's right. I think judgment is important, but I also like to add on communication skills. All the more today, the ability to communicate clearly, succinctly is important. And that's a skill kind of a bit underrated, but you see all the best leaders today, they're all great communicators, right? So learning to communicate, learning to think. The old days of learning by rote, they're over. Learning to think, learning what questions to ask, and developing a healthy skepticism, I think would be good. So that all leads to judgment call, knowing what questions to ask, how to ask them, etc. And so when you go, what do you study? Study what you love. You study what you want to learn. I did something called PPE, which, I remember my exam question was, if God is omnipotent, can he make 2 + 2 = 5? Right? I mean, if that's the kind of philosophical, anthropological questions you get, but it kind of makes you think, it makes you have some logic, and it makes you see 2 sides of the coin, and it also helps you develop a healthy skepticism. So go learn what you're passionate about, because that's what matters, and then contribute to society.
Thank you so much. I noticed we have a couple of questions, so maybe what we can do is we can take the 3 questions on the floor and see if they kind of either cluster or we can kind of take them in turn. Maybe I'll start over there.
Hi, my name is Kamil Riaz. I'm from Overseas Family School. I'd just like to ask the panelists directly, especially for young Singaporeans who are going to enter the workforce, how do you ensure that the jobs will not be taken away due to the use of AI substitution, and guarantee that they will have a chance in the workforce to pursue what they want to do? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And maybe back there.
Maybe I'll take this opportunity to advertise where I'm from. I come from NAFA, Nanyang Academy of Fine Arts, and we're the founding member of the latest university, University of Arts Singapore. So for all you 16-year-olds, you don't know where to go, come and study arts, right? It's fun, right? We do performing arts. This is something that the robot still cannot replicate.
And your question?
Yeah, so my question, sorry, yeah. So I was sent by my organization to, my name is Million. Hi, Su Shan, long time no see. So to find out what SG60 and beyond would look like from the experts, and I haven't heard anything about the creative arts. So I'd like to hear a little bit about that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And the third question here.
Good afternoon, panel. I'm Shri from Cedar Girls Secondary School. So my question is more related to the private sector because we've been discussing that quite a bit. So how do you think the government can strengthen their ties with the public sector, the private sector to further AI integration? And do you think it's important for the government to give support to local startups or SMEs in order to further widespread AI integration? Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we can start off with the questions around the creative side of the house and maybe kind of the more educational side of the house, and then move to kind of role of government when it comes to startups and SMEs. Does anybody want to kick us off with the first question?
Wow, so shows how left brain that we are. But I was just thinking about Lillian's question around the creative arts, and I can't pretend to be an artist, but I do know a thing or two about music. And I see the evolution of classical to pop and now to loops and AI-generated music. And I think we can either look at it as a glass half full or glass half empty, but I do think that bringing it all together, so people still want human-to-human experience. So with the creative arts, I mean, why would Coldplay, concerts or Taylor Swift concerts or Blackpink concerts be so popular? People want that human-to-human interaction of creativity and artistic expression. So for me, when it comes to music, I'm all for using AI for music, but I'm also all for the human kind of input of meshing, right? You now have AI mesh and loop, the constant computer loop of AI music together with a human voice or classical East-West music. I think our ability today is to put it all together and still make it sound good and even better. I do worry a little bit about how you pay for such things because a lot of creativity is now free and a lot of output is free. And this is where I think the blockchain can come in. Right, and people can be paid for their outputs and their outcomes in an atomic manner. But I think there should be governance around IP as well for creative arts.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and my maybe build on this would be two things. One, we're working a lot with artists today, and I think one of the really interesting opportunities for economic growth, quite frankly, is that I think by leveraging technology, artists can rethink what kind of artists they are. Because of the industries that have been built up around artists naturally focus on distribution. And it tends to get artists focused. So you're a singer-songwriter, or you're a playwright, or you're an actor. But it doesn't cater very well to the latent creativity in an artist that might actually be multimodal. And technology allows you to do this. And we're working with about 15 artists worldwide right now to redefine what they stand for to not be siloed. And so I wonder if there's a potential creative renaissance through this technology because it'll rethink how an artist can actually express him or herself. That's from an expansion of the arts point of view. From a talent point of view, we get about 1.4 million applications a year, and it's a lot of the world's best talent. But we're indexing more to the creative arts, and we're indexing more to the creative arts because back to the idea that I talked about around creativity, we're finding that it's actually a great training ground to be truly creative. And if you look at, so my middle guy he's a computer scientist, and 3 of his best friends are direct LLM coders at Anthropic, OpenAI, and at Microsoft. And I got them all together for a dinner because young folks like steak dinners with me because I'm paying. And I asked them, what's the hardest thing you're working on? I remember they're working at 3 different companies. And they said humor. Humor is really difficult for an LLM. And I said, why? And they said, well, you know that humor has a universal formula. And I said, I didn't know that. Tell me, what's the formula? And so across cultures, great humor starts by establishing context with the audience. The comic gets you comfortable and that you identify with the picture that the comic is painting. But then great humor changes the context quickly, that surprises you, that elicits laughter. And the LLMs they can establish context, but they can't make the jump. And that in the root is creativity. And so I do wonder, as we get back to some of these underlying intrinsics that we've been talking about, is there more role for the arts going forward in this, because it will help us be more creative going forward?
Fascinating. Thank you so much. I thought to also give some attention to some of the comments. There are quite a lot of questions that are coming through on Pigeonhole, so maybe allow me to kind of switch gears a little. I know we've talked quite a bit about the people piece, education, creative. If I can shift gears a little, I'm just going to read this. This is about more at the kind of the ecosystem level and more like a Singapore level. Singapore has been successful over the past 60 years to become a first world nation. And the playbook for the future and the growth comes with taking risks. How should Singapore balance fear of failure and eroding current base? I think I'm just reading off directly, versus taking on risks to grow, and in what areas would taking risks be worth its while? So I think this kind of relates to balancing risk, obviously staying true to what you're maybe staying in your lane to some extent, or doubling down on strengths, but also thinking about how the world could change.
Okay, maybe I should start off.
Yeah, please.
Remember that I mentioned my speech that I says, do you feel safe in the future? I think this taking the risks is, now you all fear about cyber attack. So our company size is about 280,000 employees all over the globe, and if you consider the supply chains, maybe 1 million people involved. Yeah, all the transaction, every piece by piece, you need a big attention on the cyber attack side. It's not only just coming within ourselves, but it's sometimes from the customer side as well. So these are the things may lose billions of dollars, as you know. You guys are in the real world right now, and this is not going to stop. So I think for Singapore to take the lead in all over the globe, I think you should be more robust on the cyber attack. I'm sure your government is on it already, day-by-day basis, and of course, there is areas that we can just work together in a collaboration. And of course, we have to bring all the knowledge, all the brain together to prevent that from happening. So I think think about the risk right now. There's a good opportunity for business, as well as the downside is the cyber attack. So now it's a global phenomenon. It's not only here in Singapore, Japan worse, because you were not so robust in the system. So that's my concern. To stop growth, that's kind of things we need to really, really watch out. That's my opinion is.
Okay.
So, yeah, what about?
I'm happy to chime in. I remember in 2014, I was trying to figure out how do you celebrate failure, because you want to encourage experimentation.
Absolutely.
You kind of want to create a startup culture in a big organization or a big country. Now that's not easy because you've got too much to lose, If there's too much failure, you do have too much to lose, or if people are too comfortable, they also don't want to lose, right? So Singapore has this kia su, kia si mentality, which is scared to lose, scared to die. So we've got to figure out how do you balance that. So I think we have had sandboxes, and so you sandbox your experiments, and then if they fail and they fail spectacularly and it was a good failure, you give them a failure award. So in 2014, I had my first spectacular failure using AI for wealth management. I gave the team the best failure award. And then they were shocked. They're like, huh? What's this? And then they said, no, change it to the Dare to Ask the Boss for Money award, right? So we did that. and it made it look okay. So we you have to celebrate something which is unorthodox to then make it okay. It was okay to fail. Whether in a sandbox or not, it was okay to fail. Sometimes, people think Singapore is a bit of a nanny state, We get nannied a lot. And so maybe, in some instances, we do have to fall to learn. And as we go into the frontier today, using agents, generative AI, we don't know what we don't know, right? So we're all going to go in and experiment. And the key is do it, but come back and tell us and share your failures. It's just as important to share your failures as your success so that we can learn together what did not work. So that we don't all make the same mistakes, right? So being able to share failures is also instructive in an era where you're going into the unknown, because we're all going into the unknown together.
Right.
And it's so important, therefore, to have that failure feedback loop.
Right.
The only part I would build, and Tan, I'd build on your remarks that you had on your slide that had the places Singapore can win. Capital, I think, could play a role in encouraging risk-taking. And you talked about more room in venture, more room in private equity. I mean, these are vehicles that, as an asset class, tend to encourage more risk-taking. And so I was actually taken by your talk on, are there also innovations, further innovations in the capital markets that could actually encourage this as well?
There are, and I think sometimes, we have an elephantine memory. We remember all the losses we've made, but maybe, you have to lose some to win some, right? Investing isn't a 10 out of 10 game. You have to have some losses, and you have some winners, right? And maybe as a country, sometimes we remember the losses so much that we don't dare. After suffering some losses 20 years ago, we're still thinking about those losses. And the thing is to you've lost money, pick yourself up and look at where you can make it back.
Right.
Right. That's the kind of mentality maybe we need to adopt.
Great, thank you. And I also wanted we're on this topic of kind of risk, if you will, or what risks would be worth taking. I wanted to make sure that we did cover the question earlier, because there was a question earlier also about, kind of, if you will, my language, not the my language is more kind of this balancing act, right? The role of the government and how it enables or supports startups as small and medium businesses, right? If you could kind of relate some of this, like the role of government in its enabling role, but maybe not a harsh question, but a question worth asking is which would be the riskier thing to do. Right? How should the government actually help some of these small and medium enterprises and startups, especially given AI and technology?
I just one thought on the SME piece in this, because there's a lot in that. We've done some work that shows that SME growth could be a massive catalyst for the Singaporean economy.
Right.
But one of the barriers that SMEs have relative to large enterprise actually goes back to one of the things that Singapore is really strong at, which is connecting cross-border. Right? So the costs and barriers for a small and medium-sized enterprise to do cross-border trade are much higher than for a large enterprise. And I do wonder, is there an opportunity here that would be bang-on message for Singapore, which actually is really focused on market access and lowering the cost of cross-border expansion for SMEs.
Right.
Because that part of the market is still relatively undeveloped.
Great, thank you. Nakakita-san, Su Shan, any add-on? If not, we will.
Well, maybe a little bit different than probably you asked, but let's say I'm being a Japanese, and then there are about 50,000 Japanese people here in Singapore, and 4,000 companies, but it doesn't really grow, it doesn't go less. It keeps circulating.
Sure.
The smaller guys and the mid-sized companies sometimes don't come much, because now it's a difficulty because the wages here are very high now. We don't have the benefit before like we did. The foreign exchange about 15, 20% much higher than it used to be. And of course, very difficult to get visa as well. So for foreigners to come into the business, especially startups, may have a little bit of problem facing that. So probably together with the Singapore government, we need to start talk about this. On the side with talent development, this is a big agenda maybe we should address. It's not only Japanese to limit it to, I think. So that's one thing I have difficulty facing right now. A lot of Japanese people are asking me to support, but I'm not a Singapore government people, so that's difficult things right now I face. There's a reality.
I understand. I guess that relates also to earlier Su Shan's point about making sure that that openness and that connectedness it continues to be very fundamental to our value proposition for the region. I will maybe take a question here. I think is it Gillian who has a question?
Thank you, Chairman. Gillian from the Institute of Policy Studies. If Singapore survives or will continue to survive, that would depend on sort of developing the relationships of interdependence. That's something you ended your speech with a quote from S. Rajaratnam, Su Shan. Each of you has marked out a certain vision for the future for Singapore. And so my question is this: let's just focus on Singapore, the global city. And so in each of your visions of what Singapore could become, what are the most relevant networks that we'll have to build in order to get to that future, not on our own? Because who's ever heard of a network of one, right? So in the, in those worlds, would we be connected with other global cities and let's not assume that they are global cities of today. So which are those cities that you think we might prosper from together if we connected more closely with them? You may also choose not global cities, but cities or institutions or companies, I don't know. But what are those networks that we should start building, quite apart from government to government, country to country? Thank you.
Thanks, Gillian. Anyone want to?
Well, I think, the word network, the different kinds of networks, Gillian, I think there's obviously the physical network, which is the flow of goods. There's the non-physical and tangible network, which is the flow of services. There's the flow of people. There's the flow of ideas. There's the flow of data. There's the flow of capital. And there's the flow of IP, knowledge, right? So there's different flows and different networks, and different cities or countries or companies will play to their strengths in the different flows. And I see, as I did in my presentation, Singapore as a hub for capital, a hub for ideas, a hub for data, and a more cross-modal hub for the transfer of goods and services and capital. And if you are safe, you are trusted, you can verify, you can have rule of law, if things go wrong, there's an outreach for you to protect your rights, etc., then all the more you are willing to put your capital, your IP, your flow to this country. So for me, for finance, obviously, it's our networks are increasingly, have always been with the big financial networks of the world, New York, London, Tokyo, Hong Kong, Shanghai, now increasingly India, ASEAN, etc. But as a physical country, we've been a very well-networked port and supply chain for physical goods. That's because people trust that our ports work really well. Tuas is state-of-the-art, and goods can come in and out very quickly and get moved very quickly. And then that's also our USP, but that flow, it captures what needs to come through the region. Then we have to look at where are the growth corridors and how do we play in the growth corridors, right? After the April 2nd, increasing people are looking at growth corridors of trade outside the US, TOTUS, right? I call it TOTUS, T-O-T-U-S. and that's 89% of world trade. How does Singapore play in that? Because if that 89% becomes 90, 91, 92, as other countries start to look to do more trade outside the US, which I suspect they will, Europe to Asia, Middle East to Asia, ASEAN, intra-ASEAN, etc., then I think we have a role to play as, again, that connectivity node, whether it's capital or trade or services.
Thank you so much, Su Shan. I want to take the time to quickly wrap up. We're kind of coming to time very soon. I know we can't really get to every single question that's come through. So thank you very much for your questions. I think we've chosen the ones that I think the panelists have certainly areas of expertise in. They've really given us a flyby, everything from dual transformation, longevity, Su Shan's 4Rs, creative industry. So quite a lot of topics. If I could kind of close us and kind of bring us back to the original kind of theme, if you will, kind of new pathways of value and thinking, casting ourselves out, right? Let's call it 10, 15 years. In a word or two words, if you will, right? What gives you, let's try to be kind of glass half full, right? How would you describe how you might feel, or a reason for optimism, and in this kind of dynamic world that we're living in, and from a business perspective, right? We've touched a lot on individuals and talent. Bob, do you want to kind of close us out? Yeah.
I am a half full person, and I'm a half full person for Singapore in particular, and I think the next 60 years could actually be better than the first 60. And I think the words that we have used, a connector, not a divider, a source of reimagined use of capital, lighthouse for reskilling, and a leader in technology, I think are all sources of glass half full. And somebody asked the question earlier, how are we going to measure it? I also think there's a real inspiration that Singapore measures it more widely than anybody else, that it's economic growth, but it's growth that is inclusive and sustainable. So sustainable, inclusive growth for Singapore underpinned by those things.
Great, thank you. Sustainable and inclusive. Nakakita?
Okay, I fully agree with it. And I think Singapore's future going forward. And all the presentation I gave, if you can do that all, I can move my headquarters from Tokyo to here. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Stay open, stay trusted, stay hungry, stay humble.
Thank you so much. Please, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for our three panelists.